Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card featuring the new Two Kids with Cart stamp from Gerda Steiner Designs. It's a digital stamp and I printed it on 110-pound Georgia Pacific cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring it with Copic markers. When I print digital images, I make sure to not choose the black only option, basically letting the printer use the colored ink to print it, because when I choose the black only option I do find some smearing, and I have a laser jet or inkjet printer. So if you are looking to print digital stamps, that might be a tip that helps you if you're experiencing some smearing when you start to color with Copics. And so I'm using E37, 35, and 31 to color this wagon here in the back. I made another card with a similar digital stamp that she released called A Big Load, which is a little boy carrying some pumpkins in a handcart as well. And this image provides a lot more detail in the cute interaction between the two kids. But I did wind up making a similar card because I wanted to show you a different way of achieving the same effect where there's the birch trees in the background. And on this one I'm actually going to show you how to use masking with digital stamps. I think people might hesitate a little bit with masking and digital stamps, but you can do it. And I will talk about that a little bit later in the video. So my old one I had done the pattern paper with the birch stamps, but this is just a different take. And so here with the skin I'm coloring with E00 and E11 to add some shadows. You'll notice that when I colored the cart, the inside of the cart I chose to use the darkest color because that's where the most shadows would be. And then when I colored the outer cart, I used the dark colors towards the top and the bottom to just kind of create a feeling of 3D or dimension on the cart. And so with her coat, I'm using G99 and 94. I was a little bit struggling with knowing what colors to use for this particular image because I didn't want colors that clash and I did want them to be fall colors. And so I thought that the dark green would look nice, but then I wasn't sure like what to pair with it. Normally I would, green and red go great, but that's too Christmassy and I really want to keep a fall effect. And when I think of fall, I think of yellows and browns and oranges, and I just don't quite have those yellows that would be fall yellows. I have much brighter yellows. So I also decided I didn't want brown because the cart is brown and their hair, I chose to color it brown. And so I didn't want to do their coats to be exactly brown and green because I thought it would just come off as too much brown. But you see that I've chosen to add a little bit of the blue in there, like as if she were wearing jeans or I think that would be a blanket back there in the back. So he has like a little blue blanket. And for those I'm using B95 and 97, which I think are a good denim combination color. So I did eventually decide on using kind of an orange, but not a bright pumpkin-y orange, so I went with actually what are browns in the E family, but their names are, E97 is deep orange, and it really does have that very orangey kind of feel to it. So I used E97 and 99. As you can see, I'm trying to remember to put my marker caps up there at the top for you to see, and I do have quite a few chow markers, but I have labeled them, but they are a little harder to read with the way the camera is focused on the image. And so I'm just adding the details all around it, and you can see that sometimes when I want to create a blend between two colors and there's too much of a stark contrast, I just touch the tips together, and I touch the lighter marker to the darker marker to blend it in. With the little dog stuffed toy here, normally I would probably color a dog brown, but again I'm trying to think about it as a whole picture and how if he were brown he would just blend right into the handcart. So now we're ready to move on to the masking. When you want to mask a digital image, you can simply print several at the same size. So once you copy it into your Word document, you want to copy that same sized image and paste it again. And as long as you're using the same size image and you're not stretching it out, they'll be exactly the same size and you can do masking. And the advantage of doing masking as opposed to fussy cutting is that you could do it several times. So you could print 4 images the same size and only fussy cut once. And so I used some removable adhesive to tape down those the masked pieces. So I printed it 2 times, fussy cut 1, used removable adhesive or repositionable adhesive, and taped over the areas where I Copic colored. And then I'm going to be adding this birch tree background. I want to keep the ground a different color though, so I'm using some Post-it notes to mask off the ground. The Post-it notes are also helping to keep the image on the table. And then I'm laying over this stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, which is Aspen Trees is the name of the stencil. And so after I tape it down with some painter's tape so the stencil won't shift, I'm using Faded Jeans Distress Ink, and I'm using a mini distress blending tool and dabbing the ink on. I'm doing more of a dabbing as opposed to rubbing motion because of all those fine branch pieces in the stencil, and I don't want my foam blender to catch on either those fine detailed branch pieces or even just the cutouts in the trees. So I'm just dabbing around till I get a even coat that I like, and I'm not worried so much about the areas where the children are, because I know that that part is going to be pulled off and it doesn't have to be as even. And so after I get the Faded Jeans and the sky background on there, I'm going to lift up the stencil. And I decide that I don't want the birch trees to be super bright white, and so I want to add just a touch of distress ink. So I'm taking the antique linen and a finger dauber from Sukaneko, and I'm dipping it into the distress ink, or dabbing into the distress ink, dabbing it on the mat to get rid of the most of the ink, so there's just barely a little bit of ink on there, because I also don't want to create like brown dots on the birch trees. Just a little bit of something so it's not super flat. And so then I'm going to pull off all of the I'm going to pull off the ground masking. But before I do that, I want to make sure that it's dry, because I don't want to smear the blue anywhere into the white areas of the stencil or onto anything else, basically. And so I'm switching the Post-it notes that were covering the ground to now cover the sky, using the same ones. Again, it's the Post-it notes kind of hold down the image, so I don't have to add any extra tape there. And I keep the mask over the Copic coloring because you're still seeing a little bit of their, the shoes popping out in the wheels, and I want to protect that. And I'm just adding a little bit of peeled paint distress ink, and I'm using the finger dauber because it's such a small area, but the blending tool would work as well. It's just that I happen to have the finger dauber sitting out. And so again, I am dabbing, but this would be a time where actually you could rub and it wouldn't be as, it would be fine because there are no detail things for it to catch on. So then I'm going to pull off all of it to reveal the Copic coloring underneath. And the repositionable adhesive is kind of left over on the image, but it just rubs off with your finger. I would say be careful to make sure that the ink is dry before you start rubbing off your image, and if you need an adhesive eraser, that would work as well. So now I want to create a background pattern for the card that I'll be placing it on. That particular image is very large, especially the size that I printed it at, and so I just want some interesting background for the card base. So I'm taking the antique linen distress ink and a piece of cream cardstock with a background stamp from Impression Obsession. I love these because they are 6x6, and so they will completely cover a card surface in either direction. So I just added the antique linen distress ink all over the background stamp, placed the card directly down. I like to use a napkin over it and then roll over it with a brayer, because then there's no spread onto the back of the sheet, whereas if you did not use the napkin, there might be some spread. And so you see I've mounted and given a border around the image with the brown cardstock, and then I've mounted on that note card that I just made the pattern paper for, but I want to add a little touch of something else to the bottom right hand corner to balance out the fact that the image is all the way to the left. I tried some solid cord, but the colors weren't quite right because there is this kind of orangey color in their trim on the hat and the coats and stuff. So I wanted to kind of match that, and so I found a piece of orange twine. And when I add twine, I like to just wrap it around the entire card or the entire piece of pattern paper and tie it there, because I find that to be much easier, and I'm okay with the fact that when you open the card, you're going to see the little bit of twine inside. But I don't want to quite have it so that like I would tape that down, because normally if it was a piece of pattern paper, I would just turn it over and lay a piece of tape on it. But because the cord is actually going all the way to the inside of the card, I'm going to do something else to make sure that it stays secure in place. But first, I tie it, arrange it how I like it, trim off the ends, and another great thing about tying it all the way around is you can fuss with it a lot more than if you were to commit to having only certain lengths of twine or taping down the twine before you tie the bow. And so I just kind of fiddle with it till I like it, trying to turn it over and create the perfect bow, and I have no tricks for that, to be honest. I just tie them like shoelaces. I will say I like twine better because it's a little easier than ribbon to get that perfect bow. And so you see I just added a touch of Glossy Accents. Glossy Accents is a super strong adhesive, so even just that little tiny touch of Glossy Accents there means the entire piece of twine will not move, and then when the recipient gets the card, it will be secure. So then I moved on to a sentiment. I thought about this stamp set from Newton's Nook that you just saw called Wagon of Wishes, and it would be perfect because the little boy is riding in the wagon, and they have this sentiment sentiment that says loads of, and then there's lots of choices. Loads of happiness, loads of thank, loads of wishes. This time I chose loads of happiness because it just to me looks like a really just happy card. And I figured I would send it more as a happy fall than particularly a thanks card. It didn't really say thanks to me, for instance, or birthday, so I didn't want to use the wishes. Now, I am having a little bit of trouble lining this up, even though there are grid lines on the block, because the loads of sentiment is scripty, whereas the happiness is in a printed font. And so basically what I'm doing is just stamping it off on a piece of scrap paper and adjusting it so that I really like the way it is before I place it down on my card for the final time. And it was a touch tricky because not only do I want the bottoms to be straight where like the word loads is in line with the word happiness, I also want the space between of and happiness to be about the same as it is between loads and of. And so once I finally get it the way that I like it, I stamp it onto a little cream banner that matches the card base. And I want to pop up the sentiment because there is that twine there, and if I tried to glue it straight down, there would be a big bump in it where the twine is, because I want it to be, again, below them, the way the twine is below them, because that is the focus of the card. And so you'll see that I actually had to check my foam adhesive to make sure that I was putting the foam adhesive only on the top, because the bottom of the sentiment is going to be overlapping with the twine. So the foam adhesive should be allowing it to pop up at the top. And so I just took some Scotch foam adhesive. I know a lot of crafters use this, and I really like it. Once I got a roll, I'm addicted, and I think I'm going to have to get one of those giant rolls that everyone has because I just like how it's such a low profile pop-up. I don't love, super, super thick cards because they're a little bit harder to mail. So I really love that thin profile it gives you there. So that's it for me today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Again, this is a Gerda Steiner Designs image. And if you want to see some more videos, please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be putting some of the products in the video description below. Thanks for watching.